game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Welcome, adventurers. Dylan here. And on today's podcast, I have Nichole Bradford. She is the co-founder and built the Transformative Tech and global ecosystem dedicated to educating and gathering and activating well-being tech founders, investors, and innovators. Today's Transformative Tech has members in 72 countries and 450 cities, and their tentpole events online or in person attract nearly 1,000 attendees. They help founders leveraging exponential tech for mental and emotional well-being and social and emotional wellness and human potential and performance, and find feedback, funding, and friends. They help investors find the best well-being tech founders and companies. Nichole helps corporate innovators understand and apply these powerful tools. Nichole curates the Transformative Tech Conference, the most important event of the intersection of tech and well-being. With no further delay, I'd like to welcome Nichole.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks
Great.
for having me.
I'm so excited for you to be on the show today. You have curated and created an amazing community through the transformative technologies, and it's an amazing ecosystem that actually is pushing technology into a place of positivity. So I'm excited to dive in and also learn a bit of your origin story and what got you into actually founding Transformative Tech.
Yeah. So Transformative Tech is, in short, the TLDR is that it's technology for the inner landscape. So that might be technology for mental health. It might be technology for purpose and performance. And it also might be technology for social and emotional wellness. So, that could be technology for culture, that could be technology for teams. And we can go into that a little bit more. But the way to really think about it is that we're humans. We're having a human experience. We have an inner landscape that's about our mind, attitude, culture, norms, beliefs, inner health, psychological stability, psychological safety, the ability to take risks, like all of these human things.
Yeah.
And transformative technology says, hey, there's a role for technology for the inner landscape. And so how that came about was, I was in video games, and and I have had a pretty amazing career, been in pretty extraordinary places, including, I started out at Disney Interactive and then went to Vivendi Games. And the important thing there was I eventually became a part of the core deal team on the Activision and the Vivendi acquisition of Activision and the creation of Activision Blizzard, which was an industry-defining event. I reported to the CEO, worked with the C-suite, and was one of a very small group of people who worked on an $18 billion deal that completely changed the landscape of gaming in the West. And then after that, I moved to China and became ultimately the head of operations, the director of operations for Blizzard Entertainment for China, which meant that I worked on World of Warcraft and StarCraft and a bunch of other things, overseeing the back end and also go to market. But that also meant very early upon getting there that, Blizzard changed partners in China and moved from the Nine to another company called NetEase. And that was the first time a foreign company had done that. So it completely changed the landscape of gaming in China when that happened, and what people thought, was possible. And so I was doing that, loving it. And I was moving from Shanghai to Hong Kong and had a month off. And so with that month, I decided to have a few adventures. I'm an Enneagram 7. I love a good adventure. And, I've been to 70 plus countries. And so I decided that I wanted to do 3 things. One was to go to Bhutan because I was in the neighborhood. 2 was to get PADI certified in Thailand. And 3 was to try a silent retreat. like a full silent retreat. I'd sort of played with meditation before,
Uh-huh.
but I hadn't gone full silence. And so I went to a Goenka Retreat in southern Japan. It was actually my first stop on my, on my very casually considered adventure. And I had an awakening, not an epiphany, but an actual like awakening on that retreat. And that changed the course of my life.
Wow. So there's a lot of amazing things there to unpack. One, first being exposed to, the biggest levels of gaming and what that fundamentally has, that the shift that was taking place in that, and realizing that these industries can fundamentally have huge pivots and bring you into new landscapes. So you kind of got a feel for the whole, as the gaming industry evolved, you could see it evolve right in front of you. So you knew that was possible. And so you had that kind of possibility open up, but then you had that internal reality open up to you with an awakening, which I'd love to dive into a little bit, because it seems there's various ways to get there. But can you describe and unpack a bit of the awakening?
Well, I mean, the net of it was, I would say, and I would call it a first awakening, because I have to tell you, it's like the wars that are fought over what that word means and what it means to whom is just more than like anyone wants to bear. So, basically the TLDR is that we think thinking makes a sound. Like fundamentally, we think thinking makes a sound. And let me turn a notification off. So we think thinking makes a sound. And so if when you read, you hear your voice in your head, which I hear my voice in my head. But if you hear your voice in your head when you read, it means that you're subvocalizing. And so because most of us subvocalize, we think that thinking makes a sound, but it doesn't. And one of the ways that we know this more broadly than spiritual practice is that people who competitive speed read, they actually have to they train themselves to not subvocalize, because it actually slows you down. And so you don't need, so thinking doesn't make a sound, but we think that it does. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you though. Can you see me?
I can see you. You're coming through. We have people in the crowd. You seem to be coming through loud and clear. So I'm not too sure what's.
Okay, I'm going to close some windows while we're talking.
Okay, so
So we think that thinking makes a sound, but it doesn't. And so what happened to me is I went on this 7-day Goenka retreat. I had a lot of interesting things happen, but one of the outcomes was that by the end of the retreat, that inner chatter was gone, and it was gone for about 4 months. And it turns out that you don't need to think to read. You don't need to sound like the sound of thinking. You don't need it for reading. You don't need it to build Excel models. Like you don't actually need that sound, but we think that we do, because people think that the sound of our that action of subvocalization, it's thought to start happening around 4 or 5, as we start to add layers to our identity. And so that went away. And because of that, usually the voice in your head also says all sorts of terrible things to you about what's wrong with you, what you look like. Are you too old? You're not blank enough. You're not rich enough, old enough, young enough, smart enough, tall enough, fast enough, blah, 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 blah. And so with that being gone, I got real happy. And I got real fearless, I got real happy and I got real fearless. And I also got real curious, and I also, I'm African American. I'm from Houston, Texas. My dad was a plumber. My mom was an entrepreneur, and had a law degree, but didn't practice. So I'm a solidly middle class, when things are great, lower middle class, when things were sketchy economically. But, that's who that's who I am. And so I was really aware of the realities that even though a meditation retreat, especially the Buddhist ones, might be free, like a Goenka Retreat is free, the reality is that the bulk of the world works, and they work every single day. And so even if a retreat is free, it is still an elite experience. And so, for me, I have a very democratic orientation. Like I don't think everyone has to do everything, but I think everyone should have access to the good things. And so, because on the back of World of Warcraft, I saw friendships. I saw in the data, I saw friendships and community and connections and, examples of like 15-year-olds running 5,000 person guilds filled with adults. I saw this like, this in many ways, a lot of a meritocracy in many ways, and the good games don't allow you to pay for power. So you do have to grind, like you pay with time, but you can't buy power, in a game, in a really ethical game, in my mind. And so, those are some of the principles of World of Warcraft. You can't buy power.
Yeah.
And so because I, was pro-tech, and I was also pro-tech because like growing up in Houston, Texas as a little Black girl in a white neighborhood and trying to figure out who I am, I watched Star Trek and like saw a world where humanity for the most part was on the same page. Like we'd really like gotten over ourselves, right? And we were for the most part on the same page, and we were about the business of discovery. And that really appealed to me. And the fact that I saw, Black people in that future, I was like, yay, we make it, right? And so it just was really meaningful to me. So I was always very pro-science, pro-technology. And then, having this this experience where, where I had this dramatic experience, and having the point of view that the way to really, really make it accessible, that technology, the technology is the thing that makes what is scarce abundant. And if we really wanted people to be able to have access to, a kind of happiness and fearlessness, then technology was the way to go. And I didn't have any, I didn't have anything that made me think that wasn't possible. And so that's what led to me looking for how you could use technology to make that happen. And so that's what led to me being connected to Jeffrey Martin, and us starting Transformative Tech.
That's beautiful. And there's a couple things that you are having some notifications. So I don't know if you can silence those at all, but I do want to. Perfect. Okay. Some things that I'm noticing here that are actually really amazing is that, we all see reality through the lenses that we're given, right? Or that we experience. And a couple of these different lenses that you're going through is one, you saw the power of gaming, and you saw the power of friendship through World of Warcraft. And I remember that because I had my own entrepreneur business where we actually we had a guild all in World of Warcraft, because I ran a food truck decades ago, and we got together and we all had a guild together that we'd hang out in. And I remember doing that because it was a fun way for us to just have a good time together. So, but you're having the power of friendship, right? And then in the tech space, but then you see this mind-blowing experience with that internal landscape, because we realize that we identify to this internal narrative, and we think it's us. That internal narrative is us, but you were able to separate that internal narrative from your actual consciousness and realize that while it might be that internal narrative, it is a terrible, terrible best friend. to have an experience. And so you could see, this experience that I had in my internal landscape, if only this was more abundantly available, like in the gaming space, in the technology space, and if people like Jordi LaForge can create an amazing reality of the future, then it's possible for me to do this. And then you had this, when you talked about you're talking about absolute happiness and bravery, which is a powerful combination to be able to get you to move forward. Because my guess is you probably had what I would call in the hero's journey narrative, some threshold guardians in order to be able to build up a community along the way. I'm sure it wasn't all a simple path. Can you just turned it on, everybody showed up, no problem?
Oh my God, absolutely. I mean, it's like when I announced to my family that I was leaving that, what I had done to go do this crazy thing, it was straight up craziness. And so, and a lot of people, like people that I knew in the games industry, thought I was absolutely like insane. like I actually had people call me up and be like, we want to know what's going on with you, like almost interventions, right? And so 2015, I was crazy. 2016, I was crazy. 2017, I was interesting. 2018, I was more interesting, partially because of, candidly, the high profile suicides where people that no one expected to commit suicide were beginning to commit suicide. And it was also when men started to come forward and say that they were having mental health issues and pushing on the stigma. And people started to say, oh, okay, there's a problem, and starting to realize that the scale and scope of the problem compared to the, the solutions, like, for example, like they basically, depression is the leading disability in the world today.
Wow.
And that was even pre-COVID. And so the number of, basically the number of therapists, teachers, coaches, like the number of people who deal with human transformation in all of its forms, there are not enough people, just even on the license side for depression and mental illness, to actually serve the delta, to serve the the change, or I mean the difference between how many people we would need to do it the old school way and how many people have the need. And and you would actually, I saw this really fascinating study that someone had done, and I don't remember who it was, but it basically was like if you took the student body or the school size of every licensing body, your certification body in the world that deals with mental health, like all the universities that have psychology, psychiatry, whatever, and you filled them up, maximum capacity, current capacity, it would take 100 years to meet the demand or meet the need of this being the leading disease burden. And so, it was one of those things. I would have conversations with people who were like, there's no replacing a human in this kind of area. And I was like, okay, I hear you, but you have to understand that with that point of view, that there's no room for technology in this space. You are saying it is okay for all of these people to suffer for as many years as it takes for you to be comfortable with technology being in this place. So people in 2018 were starting to say, oh, you might have something. And then 2019 was our biggest event ever. And mental health is just one piece, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But 2020, I was right. So it's like, it's like 2020 was the year that it's like everyone's like, oh, Nichole, you were right, because we were forced into using tech in these ways. And now I actually just looked at a study, because I also do a bunch of consulting around wellbeing tech. And there was a study that was done with about 3,000 people. So it's, big enough to be statistically significant. And like 73% of these people said that if their doctor did not offer telehealth, they would change doctors.
Wow.
So that's like a primary, intimate relationship. And people are saying, look, if I can't meet you online for, the stuff that doesn't require you to touch me or take something liquid from me, then I'm not doing it. Like, that's crazy. Why would I go through that horrible experience again? And it really took something like a global pandemic to get the medical community to change, honestly.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. The medical industry and also the education facilities, the irony, the fact that the places that teach people new stuff struggled with adapting to learning new stuff. And there's an
Yeah.
absolute irony there. And you're talking about the truth meter of going from, crazy to prolific to being common knowledge is what you kind of had to go through along your journey along the way. And again, those moments, I would be curious about that. They say people that can bear with any why can bear any how. So along the way, was it the fact that you knew your inner peace and you knew the gift that you would give, and that's what allowed you to endure? Because there's a lot of, we are social creatures, and that's social because there's three realities we live in. We do live in the physical reality, we do live in our own internal landscape, but we also have that third social reality. And so imagine that pressure that you got faced upon as people were saying, you're crazy. Like, what gave you that ability to continue on through that?
It just really was, I have I just have I call it the golden thread.
Okay.
It's just a knowing about some things. And I just knew. That doesn't mean it was elegant, and it doesn't mean that it was pretty. And I cried a lot of tears as I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done to my career? Like, I don't have a trust fund, I don't have a trust fund, in the, like, and I'm not married, by the way, anyone. I am dating. But I don't have a trust fund. I'm not married. I don't have any backup, right? It's just me. And but I just knew, that this was needed. And so I stuck with it. Not elegant, not pretty, lots of tears, lots of like dark nights of the soul and wondering what I was doing. But then there'd be this moment where I was, talking with someone who was building something new that I thought that the world needed, and it would inspire me.
See, right there is really powerful because people just see the aftermath. Go, oh, it's of course it's an easy idea. Just make this type of community. It's no problem. Boom, turn it on. Super successful. Yeah, of course. Such an easy idea. But that journey that you do is so powerful. And then what you talk about, which I think is really interesting, is you're talking about these moments of energy that you get from the community that actually is kind of, you're creating this flywheel of inspiration and motivation and engagement. That's the power of this community. So yeah, can you talk to me just a little bit about some of these technologies, and it doesn't need to name any specific ones, or if you do, that's fine, that really give you energy? Is there any personal stories that you've seen of people using the technologies and the profound impact that they've had, and so that that there's meaning and purpose to what you've done?
Yeah, I mean, there's many cases. One of the products that I still love so much is Moxie, a social emotional robot. And part of it is because we're all born with emotions, but we aren't born with emotional fluency. And so I think Moxie it's a really great example of how to build. So Moxie it's a little robot. It looks like a Pixar character. The guy who developed it wanted something that could be a best friend to children, but they made some really amazing design choices, such as Moxie sends children into the world. So it isn't the final mediator. So, and the people who are using it the most are people who have children who have special needs or who are on the spectrum in some way. And so Moxie asks children how they, like, a question might be, who's your best friend, Nichole? Oh, well, my best friend is Dylan. How does Dylan feel? Oh, I don't know. Well, go ask Dylan. And so it's like, it's very much, it sends children out. So it's not the source of truth. It's not the arbitrator. It's the giver of missions into the real world, with real people. So children can have real experiences, and become more comfortable with that. So that's the first design element, is that the technology is not the final arbiter of truth. The second thing is that the robot is only accessible for 1 hour a day. So children cannot binge. So in an on-demand world, how do you teach people to wait? And you hear about the marshmallow test, where if a child is able to wait for 2, it's an indicator of success. Well, how do you teach that? The way it's presented is that you either have it or you don't. And whether or not you have it will determine how successful you are in life. Well, like, what about teaching that? That's the core of transpersonal psychology. That's the difference between transpersonal psychology and regular psychology. Regular psychology is sort of like what is, and transpersonal psychology, which is the William James, like that area, is about the idea that the human mind can change, that transformation is possible. So, like, teach children to wait. How do you teach children to wait? They have to wait 24 hours to interact with the robot again. It's teaching them to wait. And then the third part is security. So parents have access to like the language logs, or like they can see what's going on with the child. Because one of the things is that word usage, at least in English, and their stuff is mostly based on English right now, word choice and the way children speak is a really good early indicator of learning disabilities. And especially with spectrum kids, being able to find out early, so not a learning disability, but a challenge, like being able to find out early that they've got that they've got a little bit of neurodiversity is very helpful for parents, because a lot of times the way parents find out is when the child starts failing at school. And when they start failing at school, then they get confidence issues.
Ooh.
And so it's not only do you have to unpack what's wrong, but you have to erase all the terrible experiences that they have when, they might have behavioral issues because they're not understanding. And so you have to unpack all of that in order to get at what this is. So their mandate was to be a best friend for children, be an ally for parents. So they're not trying to replace. It's not about screen raising. It's about giving parents a tool to understand how their child is doing and early insights. But if the parents lose the password, then the robot has to be wiped, and it will have no more memories of that child. And they do that. So what they do is everything's stored locally, and certainly probably like a great hacker could get in there and whatnot. And, I don't know how many people actually like really care what a 6-year-old thinks, but who knows, but what goes back and forth to the company is not the photos. It's not the voice files. It's just math. Yeah. So it's called a homomorphic database. It's just math that goes back and forth, no assets. And the connection is really to push new content, and the content stays with sort of like the gold standard of like, how do you teach children social emotional cues and learning. And so that I love this product because I think it's a great example of how you do it. They got security right.
Yep.
They got anti-addiction right. And they got, the human part is the part that matters.
Yeah.
Right. The technology is not the goal. It's just a tool.
I love that so much for several reasons, because I mean, the greatest technologies are the ones that connect us, right? The airplane, the cell phone, the internet, all those are just mechanisms to have us be connected, because what we're doing is we're creating digital unity, right? I mean, that's what all this is. We're all creating together is this form of digital unity where we are one. And what you're talking about is almost like a digital lubricant, digital social lubricant for kids that allow them to remove that anxiety of having to connect with other people. But if you can turn that whole needing to connect with somebody else and remove that social pressure that we all feel because we're social creatures, and you can turn it into a game, you can turn it into a mission, you can turn it into a quest, then you take the focus off of the actual social pressure of the connection, and you put it more on, I'm just playing a game. I'm just going about this. And that will then teach them the game of being a social human being, which is something that we all crave, but it's something that we aren't always given the equal tools to be able to function and facilitate. And I love that. And it sounds like what they're doing is they're de-identifying any of the actual languages that the child's speaking, and it's just setting up patterns. And my guess it's setting some sort of AI.
It's just math is what goes back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of stuff is fairly common now.
Yeah.
With ethical organizations, fairly common.
Mm-hmm.
But it's sort of like a good example. And so I think, if you were to think about it, it's like, I think the fundamental crisis that we have is that we don't know how to be, feel, and become. That's really what's going on. And, the being part, the technologies that are for it are around stress, anxiety, sleep, because if you can't sleep, like you have no choice, it's hard to be well if you're not sleeping. It has a lot of cascading effects. Around the becoming is about all of this sort of like training, social and emotional wellness, or interaction. Like, how are we good together? Like, I think trust is a skill. And I think I think the ability to trust is a skill. We all know people who can't trust and how terrible it makes them in relationship. I think the ability to create trust is a skill. Innovation, one of the primary requirements for innovation is the willingness to take risk. So the most innovative teams in the world are the ones that have leaders that establish psychological safety, which is basically, it doesn't mean nice, but it means I can take a risk safely in this group. And that risk might be, this design is wrong. The customers don't like it, actually. Or it might be, this is wrong. Or what about this? So all of that is sort of like, core to innovation. Like, psychological human health is actually the core for, I think, outrageous, endless human innovation. And so learning how to use technology for that is very important. And then the last part is sort of, well, that was feel. And then the last part is becoming. And so it's like, where are we going? So it's sort of like, if you look at where we are right now, is there's a tremendous amount of pressure that's coming from technology. And so I'll give you a really good example, is that we live in the age of networks. And so what that means is that never before has there been such an opportunity to learn and earn. All over the world, you can learn and earn in a network, which might be an Airbnb, it might be a Mechanical Turk, it might be, like, these are all networks that allow you to earn and learn and earn. The other side of it is that it's the nature of a network that basically we are all rateable in relationship to one another. And it is the nature of a network. It's kind of like, networks are kind of like, they have like a reverse centrifugal force. And I don't know what the name of that is. I should know what it is. But basically, excellence stays in the middle and everybody else gets pushed to the outside. And they know what their number is.
It's like a gravity.
Yeah, it pushes. So excellence stays in the middle, and those are the top compensated people. And then everyone, if you're not excellent, you feel a force that pushes you to the side. The reason why that matters is because our primitive brain does three things: eat, procreate, and fight in order to eat and procreate. I mean, that's really what the base lizard does. And sure, there's like a lay in the sun part, but the lizard brain eats, has sex, and defends the ability to do 1 and 2. And so, status is a big part of your ability to do, those 3 things. And so what the age of networks is doing is it is taking the technology is rubbing directly up against our base human nature. We know our status, and it isn't just our own village now, it's the whole world. You can know your status across the whole world, and it makes us incredibly uncomfortable. So it's the difference, and the difference is between what we're talking about is suffering, right? So if you know your status, and you are identified, if your identity is tied to status, then in the age of networks, the technology itself ties you to suffering.
And the reason why you're suffering, because it is impossible to separate yourself from comparing yourself to others, and comparison is the thief of joy. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So, but we know from the ancients, right? We know from the world's, spiritual traditions that there are many humans who have gone down the path of not having identity tied to status. So we know that it's something that is doable. And there's lots of people who have done it, right? And so the thing is that the only way to thrive in the age of networks, because also the people who are the most excellent, they're miserable too, because they're trying to keep it up, right? And they think if they can't, it means something about who they are often. And so the only way to really thrive, or have full aliveness, let me call it that, because you can economically thrive. But the only way to have full aliveness in the age of networks is to detach your identity from status. You have to graduate beyond your primitive brain. And the only way to do that is to have human transformation. Like, you have to actually evolve. And so that's what we have to do. And so if you look across, and that's just one example of what's happening with exponential tech and a bunch of other things. We have this huge, force change. It's compounding. And then if you look at sort of like the rise of the software line and what's actually required, because software is like eating a lot of tasks, but the tasks that are left are the human interaction tasks, the human creation tasks, the human innovation tasks, the creativity tasks where you take the software and you make it better. Like, that's what's left, but we don't teach any of that.
Yeah.
We expect people to pick it up from the culture. So we're in a place where we have a lot of pressure on the molecules of life, right? The stuff and the digitization that's happening there. And then we have the headspace that we need to be in. And then we have this gap. And for me, the gap is filled by transformative technology, because we also don't have a tremendous amount of time. I have some friends who did a really interesting study, or the way that they looked at history is they looked at it in terms of, they looked at the fall of civilizations, but they looked at it in terms of, basically their thesis is that what happens before falls is actually massive clusters of technological innovation without corresponding shifts in the organizational system of a civilization. And the organizing system, or OS, of a system, of a civilization, is beliefs, norms, values, myths, narratives. It's basically all that inner human stuff.
Yeah.
And so we're, in short, the TLDR is that we're in a place where we require human transformation, and we need it at a scale and a density. Tech has made scale a dirty word, but we need it at a density that actually makes the difference. Yeah. And we have 10-ish years to get that done. And it doesn't mean that we'll destroy ourselves, but it does mean that we have a future. We're sort of facing, do we have a future that looks a little bit more like Hunger Games, or do we have a future that looks a little bit more like Star Trek?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's society is a race between utopia and disaster. And what you're talking about on this pattern is we live in this weird paradox. And one of the things I've always if you look at like the Bhagavad Gita, the Dharmic with the need of the times, right? So how do you de-identify? Well, you can be a hermit and you can separate yourself from the network. That's one path. And the other one is to be the king that is of service to the people, completely detached to the actual production, but to be of service to the people, right?
Yeah.
Which is very counter to what the US is, which is me, mine, first, go, thrive, I win, right? So what you're talking about is we live in this weird paradox where we have to have this heroic belief that we can be the heroes of our own story, affect change, and be able to create some sort of technology or some sort of network or some sort of place that allows us to shift consciousness, to make possibility, to make opportunities, and to do it in a way that doesn't do the typical consumption, greed, I consume all, but in a way that actually instills a new belief pattern that by us all banding together, we can actually rise together and we can grow this pie versus trying to eat the pie from each other. Like
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
So then in terms of that, how do you, because there's a lot of people that get disenfranchised with a lot of this type of stuff, like, oh, the ocean screwed, I can't do anything, I'm disattached. I can't do anything with the government policies, I'm disattached. So they get this belief pattern that I'm too small to affect any change, right? So then how do you shift that change in that belief pattern to really open up the possibility that while yes, they are small, they can also have tremendous impact. So what is it? How do you, since you've gone through this, how do you make that mental shift happen for people?
Yeah. So the way I think about it is the intersection between what I call deep human and deep tech. And historically, deep technology meant sort of like wasn't consumer facing, chemical or whatever. But Thomas Friedman has this wonderful quote where he says, the world has gone from flat to fast to smart to deep. And it's sort of like the deepness is like this precision. And the world is starting to be awash with no code tools where people can build things. So that's one part. But on the deep human part, that's really being, that's really going as deep as you can as a person, becoming as, I swear my Discord's off, so that's not me.
Me.
I don't know where it's at. Like
Okay.
everything looks like it's off, but
The universe is trying to come into the space, they're trying
yeah,
to connect. Yeah, please
going
continue.
as deep as you can as a person, like getting as alive as you can, doing like getting as deep as you can. And it's funny. It's like people will say, they'll one of the other things that overwhelms people a lot is the attention economy, Facebook surveillance economy stuff. And they'll be like, oh, in that environment. And I'd be like, well, true, but let me ask you something. You have kids? And they're like, yeah, I have kids. I was like, well, Big Brother's watching you, and so are your kids. Like your children are watching every move you
Oh
make.
yeah. Yeah.
And so if you are not modeling emotional fluency to your children, because they're definitely going to be in this world, that's coming, then you're doing them a disservice. If you're not modeling, the sort of person who is at least working on disattaching your identity from status, then you are not being of service to them. So like the most basic thing you can do to, especially if you've got kids, the most basic thing you can do is get as deep as you can and help them get as deep as they can. Because what will happen is that the people who have the ability to be the most human will be the ones, should our work as I hope, they will be the ones who will be the most desired to work with the technology of the future, right? So if you want to get them ready, for their turn at the reins, get them as deep as you can, because that's actually, what we're working towards. So that's number one. And then number two is there are some things that are going to need to happen. Like, there will be a time in our lives where we will need to vote on neuro rights. Like especially if you're, if you're a young person, if you're in your 20s and you're listening to this, you need to be prepared to make your voice heard about neuro and biodata rights. So just be prepared for it. So there's that. And then the other thing is be a builder, be a creator. The world is filled with no-code tools where you can build things and make things, and and you can be the kind of builder that makes things that, like one of the big issues with data right now is that on one side you have zealots on all sides. So on one side you have people who think that they're entitled to your data, and that it's like everything that they do, it's the stink of entitlement, really. They think they're entitled to it, and so when you read their privacy policies, they are granting you privacy as if they owned your data already. It's subtle, but it makes a big difference. Yeah. And then on the other side, you have people who say, all data belongs to the individual. And so, to that I say, we're looking at in 15 years, 2/3 of the world's population is going to live in cities. And the cities are going to be smart. So there's going to be a city OS that is managing the traffic lights, the elevators, all of these things. So while I believe you have the right to hide your identity in a smart city, you don't have the right to hide your presence, because how will the traffic lights work? How will the elevators work? Like, you have the right to hide your identity, but the city needs to know if there's 7 million people or 5 million people, or if someone's on the elevator or not, that kind of thing. And so there's like public commons that are a part of it. So the truth is somewhere in the middle, figuring it out. And I think one of the things that's key is we need the ability to tag our data public, private, and for sale. We need data unions. We need the ability to have leverage. Right now we have no leverage, especially with these entitled people. And so we need that, but we need neuro rights, we need bio rights.
So there's a couple of pieces I want to touch on. Mm-hmm. So one being is I'm an uncle. I have a 7-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 17, 18, and there's this thing we're trying to teach them social emotional awareness. Where my brother said, he's like, I will never play Monopoly with these kids because it always ends in a fight. And so I took him on that challenge. I said, let me do this. I said, okay, guys, every time one of you gets upset, we're going to pause. We're going to say something grateful to the next person. We're going to do this, and we're going to do some heart head breathing exercises. And it worked for most of the time. I got most of the way through it until the little one quit. And then she got mad because she wasn't included in the heart head breathing. But it was trying to teach them this awareness. Even though she wasn't a part of the plane, she politely went away. But then we didn't include her in it, and she was very, very upset, and she didn't say things. So we had to have a pleasant conversation. But that ability to try to get them to experience, because normally it's either fist or feet, right? I'm either going to punch you, I'm going to run away. And there's that being able to sit in that pocket with the kids and teach them that, because now you're right, anybody can create anything, but then can you connect? Can you go deep? Can you connect with yourself? Can you connect with others? And there's a real power and need for that. And that's the first step of the social emotional awareness, and then regulation, right? Which is two things, because it's you have to first be aware, and then you have to regulate. I was not aware that she wanted to be included in the meditation, so we went through some regulation afterwards, and I had to apologize and play games and do dress up. But anyway,
there's also a couple of other things, which is it's like, because I have such a big background in games, a lot of times people will come to me and they'll want to make they believe that there's a world in which there should be no representations of violence. And the thing about okay, so here's the biggest issue with the shopping engines, and the recommendation engines, whether it's Amazon or Netflix or whatever. the way a recommendation engine works is it is based off of what you liked in the past and what people like you liked, and those are the things that get surfaced. And so the challenge with that is like one of the fundamental pieces of becoming an adult is having, I swear my Discord's off and I turned off my notifications. I don't know where it's coming from.
I can't imagine how busy you are on a daily basis. If you get that much notifications, I would have to have like throw a Faraday cage over your computer or something to try to keep
I don't even know. It's like I turned off my Discord. So it's not coming up. But
That's
anyway.
Okay. Yeah, please continue though. You're talking about the recommendations
Yeah.
engine
And so it's like being an adult is being presented with what you don't like and knowing you don't like it. So part of that is like, every one of us has had that, like every one of us has told a secret as a child. Every one of us has told a lie as a child, right? Anyone who says that as a child they've never lied is lying. Kids do it all the time. Well, not all the time, but they do it at least once, right?
Yeah.
And so, and so the thing is like there's this part of being adult which includes trying things and realizing that you don't like the way it feels to hurt someone else, or that you don't like, these other things. And so, I think that, what we're not trying to do is get rid of fear, get rid of sadness, get rid of anger, but it's to get into a different relationship with those things so they're not in charge, and to have the ability to experience it but not act on it. Like that's what the goal is. It's not anyone who's trying to be happy all the time is someone who is really creepy and nobody trusts.
I'm highly medicated. Yeah. No, you don't honor, because those negative feelings that you have are true and real. And if you don't, it turns into what we know: you disengage, repress, and it turns into it pops out in weird, creepy ways. It's like trying to keep air balloons underneath the water. You're trying to hold down all these things, and you're using like 90% of your mental capacity to just try to force the negativity down, versus accept it, be with it, honor it, and embrace it and sit with it. And it's being able to sit with that negativity and sit with those. It's like sitting with it's like you can't just feel good all the time. Sometimes you have to struggle, because on the other side of struggle, there is that sense of achievement, belief, growth, all those pieces. So it's like, it's a circular flow of that stuff. So you're totally right. You can't just be happy all the time, because there's obviously something that is not being acknowledged, because there's a science to sadness, and there's a piece that we need to honor. Otherwise it doesn't work. We don't work. We're not human. We need both sides of that equation. So,
and I think, didn't you interviewed Jeffrey, right? Jeffrey Martin?
No.
Oh, you should interview him next, because, so Jeffrey was my co-founder for Transformative Tech, and Jeffrey's research is really all about non-dual states. And the world there's over 200 terms, non-duality, unity, consciousness, like there's like so much enlightenment, though that is a dangerous word. You have no idea how you have no idea how ratchet spiritual people get over who's using what word.
Religion and politics, man. Religion and politics.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But really it's about, it's like the fundamental human, like the problem is the fundamental human problem, which is, that fundamental human, and I guess it's not a problem, but it's whether or not it's conscious or unconscious is the problem. So we say that there's 3 doors. Door number 1 is to remain unconscious. And in that situation, the lizard is in charge, whether it's for status or whatever else the lizard is about. Door number 2 is to manage it. And that's where a lot of the positive psychology comes in. And you really can, there's so many things that you can manage, and you can manage it. And you can you can do a lot to manage it. The third one is to actually really solve it. And that solving it is about, actually making the transition, and transitioning into, a state where, sort of like your fundamental nature is different. And for that, we have a lot of proof from the ancients that people can do this. The question is, like, how do you do it in a modern context, in a world where, religion is deprioritized, but spiritualities as a need still exist. So that's probably another hour.
Yeah.
But how do you do that? Like, they were right about some things, and we need that stuff now. I think it's fascinating that we're at a place where, the technology has put us in a place where we need to be as human as we can. And my thesis is that, being as human as we possibly can is how we actually get, more out of the technology, because we got climate change, we got inequality, we need to get, I think we need to get multiplanetary. We have longevity, we've got food, like we have so many things.
Yeah.
And, what is happening, especially with like a lot of the people who are very early to digitization, is what they've discovered is that you can't have the full benefits of digitization without human transformation. If you just hand people the software and you haven't supported them to become flexible, adaptable, emotionally intelligent, psychologically safe people, then they just take the software, and when it breaks, they go, "Oh, it broke."
I'm broke. Yeah.
Or when it's not optimized, they just go, they don't say anything. But if you actually want to max it out, if you transform the people, when you do the digital transformation, then they start kit bashing the software, making demands of it, and then the software gets better. And so my thesis is that for transformative technology, if we're doing that with the technologies that support human growth and transformation, then we get to a place where the technology transforms the people, and then the people transform the technology, and it ends up in this big loop, that is a virtuous cycle. And what I want and what I believe now, and what my next set of work is, because when I did trans tech, it was the frontier. But now, because of COVID, it's like the frontier moved. Like, we were on the frontier, and then now the frontier moved past where we were at. And I'm glad about that.
Yeah.
Like, I never meant to build a museum. It's not my nature.
Yeah.
But what I think the next thing is, there's a stack. I'm calling it the humanistic stack. And there's the real, there's the transformative augmented layer, and then there's the fully digital layer, where you have the metaverse, digital twins, whether they're cities or people or whatever. I think our best outcome is for that to be fully interoperable, and for it to be humanistic from top to bottom in kind of the ways that I've described to you. And for me, the purpose of it is that, the digital layers and the transformative augmented layer should really serve so that when we are together, it is, we are together in our full aliveness. And that's what it's for. That's what it's for.
I love it. I think it's yes, there's a lot to unpack on that, but just I want to hit a couple of things on that. So one of the things being is, like, we make the tools and the tools make us, and that the one loop in between there I would just interject is that social layer, because there's our inner landscape, we have our physical reality, then we have the social reality, and we're using that whole thing to kind of build our environments together, because I am who you think I am, and so I respond in kind. And so if you can see yourself as being, as I would say, the hero of your own story, or to be of hero to other people's, then you will rise to the occasion and you will have that resilience. Or you're talking about suffering, and you're talking about the negative side, the dark side, the light side. Think about man's search for meaning. It's not just towards pain and away from pleasure, because it's purpose. You will go towards suffering if there's purpose. A mom will go into a burning car to save the baby's life. It's suffering, but there's a deeper purpose. So within that purpose gives you the leverage to see yourself, to do things not just for yourself, but for them I am, strong enough, for them I am brave enough, for them I am this. And so if you can see yourself as being not only a member of the society, because you're talking about people that de-identify with the society, say, look, you're still a member, man. Okay, fine, I don't know your face, but you're still a part of this community. So you need to be a part of this community. I think there's a power in that, because when we get separated, that isolation it causes a lot of neuroses because we are connected in this weird, strange way. So those are some of those elements I would like to talk about. My other piece that we're talking about, I want to touch on it because we got into this area, is talking about being connected with technology. How long before you let Elon Musk put Neuralink in your head? At what point would you be willing to shave your head like me and just put in a little chip? Like, what would you need to get out of that situation? I'm just curious, if we're talking about future tech here, what would that look like for you?
Well, like one of the things that has to happen, and there's an incredible guy named Richard Witt who's working on this, but we need, before all of that, we need independent agents. So each of us needs our own AI agent who is loyal to us. And that AI agent is, able to make contracts and decisions at the speed of, surveillance, or at the speed of your data halo, online and off, and is based on the parameters you set, saying yes or no to your data being taken by someone else. And that agent, we need to have those agents in place, I think, before we all have widespread chips, because it can't be like someone off someplace else making decision rules. It needs to be you make your decision rule, and your agent is not just in your chip, but your agent is, as you walk down the street in New York from your hotel to your office or to your restaurant reservation, the agent is knowing when you're walking through an IoT circle and negotiating with it about how much data it can take and what you get paid for that data. Or you say, no, not at all. And so we need those, and there are people who are working on those. And it's, we need those, and there are people who are working on those. So we're going to need those. And I think by time you could go to the Apple store and or go to a store on the corner and get your Neuralink put in, the AI agents will be, like your own AI agent will be available by time that's actually possible. Yeah. So that's one thing. And then we are going to have to address neuro and bio rights. Like people who are like what's happening in your email and what ads you're looking at is child's play. Like that's nothing compared to, the neuro and bio rights, and that data halo. So we've got to get that right, is a big part of it. So, and then I guess the other thing I would say is that I'm not interested in uploading my consciousness. Like I'm sure at one point I will, maybe, I don't know. But I don't think that we have come anywhere near to maxing out this. There's so like, we haven't even maxed this out, right? So let's do that. Like, let's focus on that. And then I think you're right. Like one of the things that is unknown, but I think we're seeing the early tendrils of it, is that, I've been in the game for so long, really. And one of the reasons why, trans tech was horizontal across mental and emotional health. So stress, anxiety, depression, happiness, like happiness training, which is really psychological meaning making, and sleep, which leads to a lot of like physical health. There's a lot of tracking this, tracking that. The second category being the social, interpersonal stuff. And then the third category being consciousness enhancement, purpose enhancement, like that higher stuff that you get to, where if you think of the Maslow's hierarchy, as you go through every level, right now, the bulk of technology is on the lowest two levels around, food insecurity and stuff like that. But then as you move up, it also corresponds to, the different verticals of transformative technology. And by the way, the top of Maslow's hierarchy is really self-transcendence. And most people think it's self-actualization. But that's just that, he published the bulk of it first. But he was one of the first Western people to really start tracking people who were having non-dual states and flow states and a bunch of other things. And so there's that. And so I lost my train of thought. So we were talking about.
So you're dropping digital bombs along the way. We're talking about what does it take in terms to get a neural chip implant. The neural chip implant you're talking about, we needed to have an AI that's got your back, your AI stick there. You needed to have the full knowledge and rights on what you have and what you will and won't allow inside your system. And then you started talking about what other things that we needed along the way, which was you started talking about the technology right now is serving the base needs, and you started talking about the needs at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which was the inner
self-transcendence.
Self-transcendence.
Where so I know. So it's like we haven't maxed this out, and I think that we should. I know. I was saying the reason why Trans Tech went across so many verticals is because the tech is all the same. So whether someone calls who they serve a client, a patient, a student, or a customer, the real difference has been sort of like maybe the regulatory environment, and then also the passion of the founder. What was the problem they wanted to solve? What were they trying to, what were they really trying to get at? But, the machine learning is the machine learning. The haptic sensors are the haptic sensors, so all of those things. So I think I was saying that. And
where I felt you were going with it, and tell me if I'm wrong.
Question you asked before, when I get the chip.
The question before you get the chip, one of the guys, what it would take to get the chip, and you said you didn't think that we've maxed out this enough, right? And I felt that's where you were going to it, because you didn't want to actually upload your consciousness yet, because you were still focused on you. And you said maybe at some point.
I know what I was going to say. So this is a really important thing. So the early products in the category were very much tech based. So it was like out of the wearable space, and and so there were lots of bracelets for this and trackers for that. And what is happening is that people are so I've seen the same product be tech only, and then I've seen the same product add coaches, add people into the process, but the technology is used to facilitate the connections between the people. And so what their clinical studies have shown is that technology plus a person supporting you is better than technology alone and the person alone. And that's the thing. People are the sticky. And so I think there's something, and this I haven't, it's just the tendrils of, I think there's something about, and this was to your point, there is something about, we need to be witnessed to truly know that we've changed. And change is not truly yours until you know it. And the only way that you can actually know it is when you are in relation to another human being. And so that's the thing. So, yogi in a cave is easy. Yeah. Like sitting in a cave, Milrepa, like meditating and eating thistles, easy compared to going home for Thanksgiving, and like not getting triggered, like he was not hanging out with his mom, right? Like, that's the thing.
It's that fine line, man. It's like the same thing. It's like, it's easy to run away. It's easy to fight, but can you stand in that fine line? And the fine line is, it's easy to go into a cave when you have no temptation. It's easy to go and get all the temptation and go to Vegas and do whatever. It's hard to sit in that fine line and be able to run that course. And then also what you're talking about is that reflective of what I said was, I need to be the hero of my story, and I need to believe that you believe that. And that method of being something for the tribe and being someone in that space is kind of what we're talking about. And what I'm telling, like, almost like what you maybe think about, you're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I feel like there's a layer on top of that now, which is the digital transformed self on top of that, where it's not just transformation and the non-dual state, but using the tech assisted version that allows you to reach even the higher peaks. I don't know. I just thought about that as we're going through it. So I don't know if it's 100% true. But it was just the thought process of we can get further. I mean, technology is just a magnification of human intent and will. So if we use that technology, we can use it to become more for us and for the other people in our world. And so it's an interesting to think about that. It allows us to merge deeper with ourselves and other people, which is it sounds like what your whole the trans tech community is all about. And is that your what's your holy grail? What I would call the holy grail of the hero's journey for you in creating this trans tech community and all the work that you do? Is it do you want to create that starship in the space and be able to travel to other planets, or what is it? What is it for you? Yeah.
No, I would say what I want now is I want the stack to be humanistic, and I want it to be infused with consciousness on every level. That's what I want.
To bring humanity to technology, to use it to connect us and not disconnect us.
Well, it's yes, but it's also, it should be for our transformation and betterment, or betterment's the wrong word because there's nothing wrong with us, but it should be like the stack, I think, of the real, topped by the augmented layer, topped by the fully digital layer, should be human focused, human centric. It should be support our transformation. It should be interoperable, and it should support the development of human consciousness.
Beautiful. And
so that's what I want.
It's beautiful, and it is the whole package. What is the last question I've got for you on this is, what is the dragon? If that's the holy grail, what is the dragon that you would need to defeat, that we would need to defeat in order to make that come true?
Well, I mean, it's the people have to build these things, and we need the things that make them safe for us. So we need the AI agents, and we need the rights, and we need the education. So we need that. And there'll be mixes. The reality too is it's sort of like a lot of times, especially since so much of the stuff I look at is like, like the inner landscape, your inner landscape is already knowable. Like you're actually already known. So people who are like, what's coming, it's like, yeah, what's coming is kind of scary, but already it's pretty like, right now only governments and ad sellers look at it. But, if all the pieces of your data halo were to be pieced together, including all the bio data that you drop, like your gait and psychological state are tied already. The way that you walk, right? So, Wi-Fi can pick up emotions. Like, it's just really like the stuff that I've seen, like,
wow.
Being able to, the people can like look down your, into your eye and see cognitive load, like we're revealed, but it's not connected. It's not connected yet. And so we need to get ahead of that. So I would say the dragon would be apathy. The dragon would be people not building. Like, you got to build the good stuff. The dragon would be, people not getting into the arena and building the good stuff. People not demanding the good stuff. People not, choosing to join the data unions and things that give them leverage. People not, taking the opportunities that come to them to become as deep as they can and teach their children to be as deep as they can. I actually, I'm incredibly optimistic, and not from a tech optimism kind of way, but just because I pay a lot of attention to the technology arcs and how they compound. And so we're very quickly getting to a place where, on the molecular level, the shift from extraction to creation is much closer than you think. Like a lot of times when people think about AI driven, discovery, they think about drug discovery and a bunch of things. But people are doing AI driven material science discovery. So the ability to make materials that don't create the kind of waste that current materials do, that are stronger and, and tied to nature and a bunch of other things. So like that stuff is moving as fast as everything else. And so, but we do have some existential threats, mostly around the climate. And so, it's, it isn't a given, history doesn't write itself. And so, like the magic pixies are not going to do it. Like you have to get off your butt and get in the arena and build the things that need to be created.
Oh, that's beautiful.
In some form or another. And the worst case, that means maybe you fund there's someone who's got a Kickstarter and they're building good stuff and you put your $25 down, like do that, like whatever it is, do it.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, I actually got started in technology because I backed a small little project on Kickstarter known as Oculus. And my headset came in and I was just like, oh, what's this? And my mind was blown. I was like, okay, let's figure this out. But you're right. It's like, bringing it full circle with everything you're talking about. Like, you're talking about like, so the dragon of apathy, the dragon of don't believe that you can do it, the dragon of thinking that you can't have an impact in this world. And it really, we need to do it through hard work and effort and belief and people calling you crazy and you just knowing that you're early and your ability to keep going along your path, and keep going through the whole course and say, I know it's okay if you say I'm crazy because at some point you're going to say I'm awesome and I'm going to keep going. So,
well, the good news is one of those things is if you do this kind of thing and you do it for long enough, you get to the point where like someone said to me, they were like, oh, you're right. That must feel very good. I was like, I'm past the point where my identity is based on that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like it lasted, the journey lasted just long enough that if that's how I was fueled, I would be foobarred. Like not wired like that anymore.
Professional.
Had to really dewire that to stay the course. And so, for me, it's really, I think this next thing is also really the thing that matters. And I don't think I'm quite as early as I was last time. So I'm going to start. I'm working on a book right now, and I will be starting to talk about my new theses next year. So I'm taking this time in the fall to like really dig in and some other stuff. So I'll start talking about it next year. But I'm pretty excited about this. I think a lot of my thinking now is really, it's very different than what many people are saying. I think it's really new. And it's kind of fun. It is fun to like see new things. And so it's new thinking and, and I think it's different than what most people are hearing. And I'm going to start pushing that stuff out next year.
I think that's beautiful. And when you are ready to launch your book and you're ready to announce it and promote it, please, you are more than welcome to come back on the show and talk about it and release some juicy nuggets along the way. Because that would be, that sounds incredible. And so that'd be amazing. And so with that being said, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you can tell them how to get a hold of you or the community that you're a part of?
No, I think we covered a lot and I have to go. So transformativetech.org, if you want to be a part of this, join the community. And I think that's
all right. Mic drop on the way out. Nichole, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time, all the effort, all the grind that you've done. It's very much appreciated. So thank you for pushing society in the right direction. And I will see you on the other side.
Right. See you on the other side.
All right. Bye now. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening.